Appropriate positions on this. We're going to go ahead and kick off the next panel. This one I think is of particular interest, at least it is to me, in terms of the maritime workforce of the future. And specifically, the subtitle is Maritime Careers for California's Women and Youth. And we're getting there. Good. Everybody come back and sit. Good deal. Moderating this panel, we're very honored today to have one of our honorary co-chairs, Assemblymember Bonnie Lowenthal with the 70th District, California State Assembly, who will provide the moderation services. For this, Assemblymember Lowenthal is among the most experienced and seasoned members of the legislature. During her first 2 terms in the Assembly, she helped deliver 18,000 good-paying jobs and protected the employment rights of thousands of workers while standing up for children, seniors, and the environment. In addition to chairing the Legislative Women's Caucus and the Select Committee on Ports, Bonnie Lowenthal is chair of the Assembly Transportation Committee, an assignment that allowed her to build on her previous experience on the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority. Her district includes the largest port complex in the nation, one of the most diverse populations in the state, and the only inhabited island in California, our own Catalina. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Assemblymember Bonnie Lowenthal.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and it's great to be here talking about my favorite topic, thinking about my favorite topic, which is our ports in California. The billions of dollars worth of goods that move through our port complex each day travel across miles of railways, bridges, and highways to industries and consumers across the country. The Port of Long Beach alone generates about $16 billion in annual trade-related wages statewide. Add that to the impact of all of our ports statewide, and this is truly an industry to be reckoned with and cherished. I know all of you here do, otherwise you wouldn't be here. All of this activity means jobs. The Port of Long Beach supports more than 30,000 jobs in Long Beach, 316,000 jobs throughout Southern California, and 1.4 million jobs throughout the United States. That's just one port. It's a big industry and it's evolving. Today, our ports are embracing new technology and clean energy, all with the goal of moving goods faster, safer, and cleaner than ever before. Our ports are also evolving when it comes to their employees. Today's maritime workforce is more diverse than it ever has been. Many of the barriers that blocked women or held them back are falling. I'm proud to say that the opportunities for women are only growing. Today's panel will give us a better understanding of the types of careers available to women, the new models and best practices out there, and a glimpse of the maritime workforce of the future. So let's get going. The first panelist is Susan Anderson Wise. Susan is a constituent of mine and a harbor commissioner with the Port of Long Beach. She was appointed to a 6-year term on the commission in 2008 by Mayor Bob Foster and confirmed unanimously by the City Council. Ms. Wise has broad experience in both commercial and civil litigation, employment law, and corporate governance. On top of her leadership roles with the legal aid foundations of LA and Long Beach, the Long Beach Children's Clinic, and many more organizations, she's served as a mediator for the LA Superior Court and a hearing officer for the Long Beach Civil Service Commission for the past decade. This is a woman who knows how to bring people to the table and get things done. Susan, please join us.
Good morning, and thank you, Bonnie, for that very nice introduction. Bonnie and I go way back, and it's quite an honor, and it feels like my life has gone in a circle to be here speaking to you on this topic. The way we're going to do this morning is I'm going to give you some examples of what is going on at the Port of Long Beach on these issues, and Professor Brickman is going to give you more of an overview, and Laura has been in the trenches since the very beginning, so she'll have an interesting perspective as well. So one of the things I've been lucky to be able to work on while I've been at the Commission is the issue of workforce development. And we have had the opportunity to develop a special event, which we call Celebrating Women in International Trade and Goods Movement Industry. I want to give you just a little bit of information about the port to follow up on Bonnie's comments. As you know, we are one of the key economic engines for Southern California. We just finished our third best year in history with container cargo up 11.3%. And last year we grew faster than any major port in North America and 4 times faster than the U.S. economy. The big ship era is upon us, and we are already welcoming 14,000 TEU ships. We have the equipment, we've got the deep water, we're all ready to go, and we're doing it. And we're in the midst of a $4 billion 10-year capital program, the biggest in the nation, to welcome even bigger vessels to be competitive for decades to come. We continue to honor our responsibilities to our community, and those go beyond our business activities. We're very proud of the fact that we've reduced diesel emissions by 81% since 2005 when we adopted the Greenport policy. But every day, we realize the need for more creativity and more innovation to find new ways to be efficient, green, and productive. Now, we have a great staff at the Port of Long Beach. I think we've got the best maritime professionals in the world collected at our port. But we need an upcoming supply of qualified new employees to reach our goals. And I think of this as human infrastructure. Most of this conference has been focused on big physical things. But for this part of it, we're going to focus on human infrastructure. So our Harbor Commission has always recognized the importance of this and are proud to have presented nearly $500,000 to 300 high school and college students since 1993 for industry-related scholarships. Some of these kids are the very first people in their families to go to college. But the celebration of women is a different type of event. We need both young men and young women to consider careers in the port industry. So the goal of this program has been both to celebrate the women who have been the pioneers and are the leaders in this industry, and at the same time to introduce our industry to a whole new generation of leaders who may not be aware of the opportunities that we have to offer. So this is how it started. A couple of years ago, we were celebrating our 100th anniversary, and they dragged out a lot of these photos. And I'm not sure you can see her, but in the center there is a woman with a big hat on. And I asked, so who is she? What was she doing? And to this day, we do not know who she is and exactly what her role was. But it was that question that generated the beginning of the Celebration of Women event. We realized it couldn't have been easy for whoever she was to be part of the industry at that time. And it occurred to us that the way to do this was to develop an event which would honor women of the past by encouraging women of the future to be involved in our port. So we developed this event, and we've done it now for 3 years. And what it does is combine industry leaders and legends as mentors with high school students just starting out. And I have to stop here for a little personal interlude. I came to Long Beach in 1974, just having graduated from law school. There were only a couple women practicing law in Long Beach at that time. One of them was Louise Duvall. She had just become the president of the Long Beach Bar Association. And as it turned out, she started making the path for me. I followed in her her footsteps both at the Bar Association and then with the Harbor Department. In 1979, she was the first woman ever appointed to the Harbor Commission by the mayor and the city council. We have 5 members of the Harbor Commission. And so not only in the law, but in international trade, she paved the way for me. She was kind to me, she encouraged me, she was a mentor. Our port has been around since 1911, and since this current commission structure was formed in 1925, there have been 65 commissioners, and 5 of them have been women. The 5th was appointed just a couple months ago, marking only the 2nd time in the port's history that the board has had 2 women members at the same time. And as I do the math, the port's been in existence since 1911, and in that 103 years, for approximately 8 months of that 103 years, we have had 2 women serving on the commission at the same time. So, meanwhile, the percentage of staff at the port, the number of women has increased as well. Since 1982, the number of women at the staff has gone from 20% to 35%. During that time, women in management have grown from 8% to 18%, and in the professional ranks, and I find this very interesting, women have grown from 10% to 45%. So the professional ranks, the number of women is increasing more quickly. So let me tell you a little bit about this event. It's become an annual event, and it really accomplishes 3 goals. It does provide a fitting tribute to women pioneers in our industry, like Louise Duvall. It acknowledges outstanding women in today's workforce, and it provides a wonderful introduction for young women in our community to consider this industry for their careers. It shows them what their options are, and I think showing them their options is critical. The first year, we had 100 people, including 30 local high school students. The second year, that grew to 200 and about 70 students. And this past year, we were able to bring more than 90 sophomore and junior girls from the Long Beach Unified School District to the luncheon. And I have to tell you, after being in so many meetings where I am one of maybe 2 women in a room of 20 or whatever, it was quite something when the doors to the ballroom opened and in came 200 women and girls, high school girls, all of whom were interested in this industry, and they were all women. It was really quite amazing. Before the lunch began, we had booths set up, and the kids had an opportunity to meet with Coast Guard, Cal Maritime Academy, the Center for Trade and Transportation at Cal State Long Beach, and FOSS. And just a little historical footnote here. I don't know if you know, but FOSS was started in Seattle by a woman, Thea Foss, who tried to make a little extra money for her family at the beginning of the last century by renting out a small boat for fishermen. And as you know, she did pretty well. Then we have a very nice luncheon, and for some of these kids, it's the first time that they've ever been in this kind of a business luncheon setting. And over lunch, they have the opportunity to speak with the women at their tables. We have assigned seating, usually 4 kids and 4 professionals. There's a discussion leader at each table assigned who moderates the conversation, keeps it focused, and makes sure that everyone is engaged in it. And then we also show a video, and the video is usually 5 or 6 minutes long, and I don't want to take that much time here, but I wanted to show you a few clips from the video, and it's a way that we show the kids what it's like working at the port. So could you roll the video now?
Hi, I'm Clovey Jean Good. I'm a walking boss foreman. We're able to drive large machines, cranes, heisters, things that women, once upon a time, women never could do or would do.
I'm Laura Kovary. I'm the port superintendent for BP Shipping.
I have a master's license, so I'm licensed to be a captain on a ship. And I also have a master's degree in maritime management Both of those things combined helped me to get the job that I have now.
When I went to college, I studied chemistry, and then I went to graduate school and studied environmental sciences, and really got interested in trying to do what I could to help benefit the environment. And so I ended up here at the Port of Long Beach because they've got great programs really focused on doing what we can to improve the environment for the local communities.
Hi, my name is Lily Marinkovich and I'm a crane operator. It's technical, it's challenging, it's great, it's a fast-moving operation.
I'm Frances Keeler and I'm an attorney here with Keesler, Young & Logan practicing environmental law. I work with regulatory agencies and I help other people comply with rules and regulations and to reduce pollution, and I love that.
My name is Mary Kay Elizio, and I work for San Pedro Harbor Ship Supply here in the harbor. We supply all the ships that come in and out of the harbor with food, cabin stores, which is cleaning supplies, and hardware. Anything you can imagine goes on a ship.
Hi, I'm Brenda Martin, Senior Operations Manager here at ITS. I'm in charge of managing vessel discharge and loadout. You need to have a hard work ethic, have good communication, make decisions quickly, and be basically a people person because you're dealing with a lot of different folks.
I would tell young women to go for it. History is in the making.
So by the time they've seen the video, you can almost imagine a port or this industry filled almost completely with women. Think about it. I was asking Norm Fassler-Katz, this group has been giving out the Gregory Award for 4 years. Last night, you gave it for the first time to a woman, Monica Wagner. You've had several keynote speakers today or during this conference, and this year you've had 2 of them as women. So I think that says a lot, and I salute the Symposium and Norm for bringing women up to the podium. Anyway, the last part of the lunch is a panel discussion, and each year we've had 4 different women on the panel, and I've moderated the panel. Each one tells about her special journey and offers advice to the kids based on her experience. And these women have been everything from people working as freight forwarders to someone overseeing a terminal to a member of the Coast Guard. In this picture, you can see this year for the first time, Cal Maritime attended, and I thought it was a great opportunity to show the kids something that was in their reach in terms of their education. And we had one of the cadets on the panel this year, Stephanie Terraquez. This was a great addition to our conference. And I think when those kids went home that night, they took a message back to their families. It's a way for our port to connect to the community, and that's very important because, as Bonnie mentioned, directly or indirectly, the Port of Long Beach supports 1 in 8 jobs in our city. And it's important that the people of the community understand what we're doing. And so besides promoting the industry to the women, to the girls in particular, it reaches out to our community. I have to say, we are lucky because we have a great relationship with our school district. The school district lets the kids out of school, the teachers select the kids, and the teachers accompany the kids to the luncheon. And this is a relationship that didn't just happen overnight. It's something that the port has nurtured for many, many years, and now we're able to cash in on it. We have an organizing committee, and some of these are familiar faces. Laura Kovary, who's on the panel with me here today, Michelle Grubbs from PMSA, Frances Keeler from Keesler, Young & Logan, Elizabeth Warren, who's also here from Future Ports, Audrey Curve, used to be on port staff, now is with an event planning organization, Carolyn Martin, our beloved operator at ITS, and myself. We've also had Sandra Holden, who does the videos, and then we're lucky to have our wonderful port staff, Bianca Villanueva from Government Affairs, and people from Communications. One other thing the port is doing, and this is the other part about recruiting, is retaining women. And just this year, our Human Resources Department developed the Women's Leadership Circle. It was formed to train and support women. The women basically decide what they want to do. I've attended one of the meetings. They're meeting quarterly, but I think this is going to be a very effective tool for retaining the great women that we already have on our staff. The first year, the port itself put on this event, but since then, we've been able to get sponsors from industry, and this is a list of our sponsors this year who made it possible for us, along with the resources that the port provided, to provide this event at no charge to anyone. So this is just one example of what we can do. I've been able to talk about this at various conferences. I spoke at the AAPA National Convention, the IAPH World Ports Conference, and the National Association of Women in Construction. And the thing I think is the best about this is it's really a very simple program, but it brings all these facets of the community together. It gives us a chance to show young women their options. And I hope that perhaps you in your organizations or your port will find a way that you can do similar work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. I don't think she mentioned that she is responsible for this program. This was her baby, and it's very successful, and we thank you for it. Let's give her another hand for what she's doing. Our second panelist is Jane Pacht Brickman. Dr. Brickman is a professor of humanities with the United States Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York. Dr. Brickman holds a doctorate in history from City University of New York and is currently working on an oral history exploring the changes in the maritime industry since the inclusion of women. Dr. Brickman's work has won multiple awards and resulted in recognition on the international stage. We're incredibly lucky to have her here this morning. Dr. Brickman.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Assemblywoman Lowenthal and fellow panelists and friends, and hats off to the Port of Long Beach. Maybe my remarks don't have to do with your port. You are in the forefront, I would suggest. Anyway, I am an academic, so I'm going to do what academics do, and I am going to share ideas. I'll begin with my thesis. Here it is. It's been 40 years since women were first admitted into maritime academies, and 4 years later presented themselves as ship's officers. And still, I argue, there is not meaningful gender diversity. I got to get used to this. Okay. This contrasts significantly with gender diversity in other professions that in the 1970s were predominantly male and were defined by a strong masculine culture. So law, medicine today, half the entering classes is female. STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, these fields in college now boast female representation in majors up to 26%. Even the military academies have achieved what I mean by meaningful diversity, that is a critical mass of female representation of between 20 and 25%. Studies show that this is the tipping point, the proportion necessary for the true benefits of diversity to kick in. So I'm going to argue that this lag between maritime and these other fields, which in the 70s were predominantly male, is not just of academic interest. I suggest that it works to the detriment of the maritime field. So what do? In the interim, I think what we have to do is know that until there is meaningful diversity, academies must still make programmatic adjustments to counter group behavior that emerges in college populations when gender ratios are skewed. What do we do to achieve a critical mass? We listen to mariners. They will tell us, and this is what I've been doing over the past 5 years, interviewing mariners in all fields in all aspects of the profession, and they will tell you that diversity improves academic and business performance. Read emerging new studies of business which show that diversity is an element of competitive advantage for companies. But once we're convinced that diversity is positive, let's drop diversity as a criterion for selection. It's divisive and pits men and women against each other. Instead, replace diversity with a new ideal of a maritime officer, one that is most suited for the 21st century. So that's where I'm going. And I don't have sexy slides. Sorry. Basically, I don't know if anyone has read Rose George's book, 90% of Everything. It's a wonderful description of the maritime industry today and largely suggests that this vital lifeline is unknown to the public. So the first thing we have to do is do more of what the Port of Long Beach is doing. We've got to get mariners out there. Yes, Captain Phillips' story is important, it's compelling, but the merchant marine is more than fighting pirates. So we have to get our officers out there, out to schools, and we have to bring schools to our ports. I don't know if you can read that, but people who sail love it. People who work in this industry love their work. But we have to get young men and women who are just beginning to imagine independent lives for themselves, hearing the words of our mariners. There are all sorts of recruiters for the STEM professions. We have to fold maritime into STEM recruitment. But recruitment, especially of women, I'm going to get some water. I brought from New York a terrible cold we had. I know you've had drought. We've had snow and rain and sleet and ice. Thank you. So recruitment of women does not necessarily mean that we retain them. And a lot of the decision-making depends on what the academy experience was like. Did academies help to shape confident young women leaders? What was the Sea Apprenticeship like? Did women find assurance that a seagoing career could be compatible with a family life? But here's what we need to do, too, at maritime academies. Just because it's been 40 years since women have been admitted into academies does not mean that we have overcome the issues created by skewed gender disproportions. Gender demographics, when they are skewed, create kind of predictable behaviors. And we have to counter those behaviors or those cultural aspects by creating voice for women at these academies. I think that quote from a woman engineer is particularly apt. Women don't need help becoming engineers or special help in becoming engineers or navigators, but they do need assistance in navigating a culture that is dominated largely by men. So what do schools need to do? And it's to give women voice, to make them feel that they are part of a culture. It could be as simple as placing 3 women in an academic section. That will change immediately the dynamics of a classroom, and women will begin to speak in class. Safe spaces, what could that mean? It could be as simple as having varsity athletic team options for women. Here are some of the things that women basketball players say at Kings Point. "You are free here," one woman said. Another, "You're free who you want to be here," which suggests that when you're not on the team, you're not exactly free to be who you want to be. Another woman said that varsity sports represented or were akin to sororities in traditional colleges, and another called her teammates one big family. Maritime academies still have to bring women together to talk about what it's like in the profession, and these discussions have to be candid. We have to talk about the positives, but we also have to talk about the continuing challenges women face in the field, because if we don't talk about that, then if there is a problem, what will happen is that women blame themselves for that problem. So these discussions, women have to be brought together to, until there is this critical mass. We have to survey our climate to ensure that all academy students feel free to report problems, that they trust the chain of command, and of course we have to have a strong sexual assault prevention and response policy. Here's the key, though, and I think that when industry leaders and maritime educators understand this, I think that we will amp up our efforts to achieve diversity, because without it, we are shortchanging our education and our business performance. And that's really a large part of my thesis, that with diversity, and this is when you talk to mariners, this is what they say, that the whole work environment changes. There's greater civility, there's fewer fights, there's a stronger work ethic. One midshipman said, "I work harder because women work harder here, and so I have to outperform them." There is something that diversity brings to a work or an academic environment that really shapes a work environment. So what do businesses have to do? I think we have to be honest with ourselves. It's not just a matter of numbers. Where are women in the company? Are they in operations? Are they in areas that make profit for their company? Or are they in administrative support services? We have to look at our culture as well. What do we mean by nuances of exclusion? Well, what is the composition of meetings? How many women are at various meetings? Do they have opportunities to speak? To what extent are they interrupted? These are very subtle issues, but unless we look at them and we're honest with ourselves, they can be very discouraging to minorities. What are our professional magazines like? Do they show women in leadership roles? If you were a young woman thumbing through a maritime journal, would you see a place for yourself in the industry? So to achieve greater diversity, these are some of the things that maritime shoreside businesses need to do. Shipping companies have to understand that what's good for women is good for men, that there really is no distinction. And this comes out again and again in interviewing mariners. There used to be, this thought that you couldn't bring women into seagoing careers because they'd want to leave when they have families. But guess what? Men want to leave too. So men talk about quality of life issues. Men talk about companies providing paternity leaves. These are not just women's issues. And men talk about companies providing them with easy transition from ship to shore, because increasingly men and women are thinking in terms of 5 years at sea and then work ashore. So these are some of the words from mariners. Mariners talk about diversity as a value in terms of operations. And it's just not a politically correct thing to do. But here I think is the important aspect of my presentation. I think we have to drop diversity as a criterion for selection, because diversity just resonates negatively both among men and women. Men feel resentful. If you talk to mariners over and over, they will talk about reverse discrimination. They will talk about the need to hire the best qualified. But that's sort of like a code word to suggest that we're not doing that now. Women will feel very defensive. They are constantly fending off insinuations, sometimes subtle, sometimes direct, that they are there because they are filling quotas, not because they are qualified. So I really believe that using diversity as an element for selection is not serving either men or women. What do we need to do? We have to, I think of a new ideal for maritime officers. Certainly, all maritime people need to know the rules of the road, need to know how to ship. But more and more ships require brains, not brawn. And because of multicultural crews, communication skills are critical, as is cultural awareness, as is collaborative leadership, as is ethical decision-making. We need leaders in the maritime profession who can move easily from ship to shore. This quote on top comes from a book called, very provocatively, A World Without Men, written by Hannah Rosen, and she doesn't really mean that, by the way. But what she is saying is, maybe for reasons of exclusion over the years, women tend to bring to the workplace a different set of skills, skills that she argues are valuable for the economic landscape of the 21st century. And it's not that men don't have these skills, it's not that women monopolize these skills, but when we look for a maritime officer based on broader sets of skills, I think that we will widen the net and bring in a more diverse crowd without using diversity as an element for selection. Let me just give you, and I'll close with this. One of my interviews was with a captain, a woman captain of an MSC vessel. Now, these are large ships. She commanded a crew of 250 sailors. So you need technical expertise to achieve this kind of rank. And she's sailing as master, and there was real racial tension aboard her ship. Now, I think that the typical response to that would be either punish the malefactors or bring in everyone for boring training on tolerance or whatever the subject is. What she did, I thought, was very interesting and apt and represented the kind of collaborative, empathetic leadership that I think we need in the future. She brought everybody in, created small groups of crew members, and had them talk about their life stories. What were their concerns? What were their families doing? What were their expectations for themselves in the future? What were their worries? And as the crew members listened to each other, they realized they were among a human family, that they were all sort of dealing with the same things, and that racial tension subsided completely, and the ship functioned beautifully afterwards. These are the qualities I think that if we look for, we will automatically achieve diversity, and no one will argue that those brought in are not the best qualified. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Our last panelist is Laura Kovary. Ms. Kovary is the Chief of the Marine Facilities Division within the California State Lands Commission. After graduating from the California Maritime Academy, she sailed on both U.S. and foreign merchant ships, eventually upgrading her merchant marine license to master unlimited tonnage. She served as the second in command on the SS California in Desert Storm. She's held various positions on the LA Long Beach Harbor Safety Committee over the past 13 years. She served as the California Port Superintendent for BP Shipping. And if that's not enough, she's the current president of the LA Long Beach chapter of the Propeller Club. Please welcome Laura Kovary.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to try and figure this out and keep my slides in order. I just wanted to start out, I feel I would be remiss if I did not talk about the maritime workforce in the United States without addressing the Jones Act. The preamble of the Merchant Marine Act of 1920 states, "It's hereby declared the policy of the United States to do whatever may be necessary to develop and encourage the maintenance of a merchant marine, sufficient to carry the greater portion of its commerce and serve as a naval or military auxiliary in time of war or national emergency, ultimately to be owned and operated privately by citizens of the United States." The Merchant Marine Act of 1920, also known as the Jones Act, was passed into law under President Woodrow Wilson. The Jones Act established our cabotage laws as well as our requirement to maintain both a merchant fleet, a viable merchant fleet, and the trained personnel to operate that fleet. The Jones Act was established to protect the nation's sea lift capability and its ability to produce commercial ships, to maintain a viable workforce of trained merchant mariners, to protect seafarers from substandard living and working conditions. The U.S. Merchant Marine assisted with deployment of troops and equipment to Desert Storm, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and the war in Afghanistan. The Jones Act plays a strong role in our national security as well. As an example of our needs for a U.S. Merchant Marine, during the first Gulf War, a foreign crew on a foreign flag American President Line's ship refused to sail their ship into the war zone in the Persian Gulf. APL had to fly an American crew out to the Persian Gulf to sail that ship and deliver the cargo. Until the very recent past, the U.S. Merchant Marine was predominantly made up of white males. Hugh Nathaniel Mulzac, born in 1886, was one of the early African-American merchant mariners. He sailed as a mate for Black Star Lines until they went out of business. He earned a master's license in 1922. However, he sailed in the steward's department for over 2 decades due to racial discrimination. He was finally offered a captain's position during World War II on September 29, 1942. Although women were first allowed to enter the U.S. Merchant Marine academies in 1973, as far as I know, there were no restrictions on minority applications. However, like women, there were very few role models for them, for the minorities who might have encouraged them to attend a maritime college. The first classes of maritime academies, which included females, Lynn, graduated in 1976. California, Texas, Maine, and New York academies each graduated a few women. From what I've seen, the numbers of African American graduates were even fewer. The maritime academies, although required to enroll women and minorities due to their receiving public funding, did little to encourage them. As a member of the second class of women to attend California Maritime Academy, I found that a large number of both students and teachers were discouraging women rather than encouraging them. Those who were supportive of the female students were afraid to voice their opinions for fear that they would also become the targets of harassment. I did not see any blatant racial discrimination, however, sexual harassment was prevalent. At the end of my first year, I had one of the instructors, with whom I had never had a class, approach me and ask me by name if I had heard the terrible news. I asked what that might be, and he responded with, "There are supposed to be 12 more women here next year." This was a mild comment compared to the things that my classmates did and said to me and other women during my 4 years at the academy. However, coming from an authority figure, it was especially disappointing. I will admit that this was many years ago, but I'm hearing from young women who attend or recently graduated from maritime schools that these attitudes still exist. There seems to be a feeling that these behaviors are acceptable. The young women feel that in order to succeed, they have to tough it out. They rarely report this harassment because, in many cases, it becomes a he said, she said situation. Academy administrations have a long history of turning a blind eye, or when harassment is reported, they have not been able to protect the victims from retaliation. Rather than recounting a number of my own stories and those of others, I will try to address what I see needs to be done to encourage young men and women of all races to choose a career in the maritime industry. It's important to point out that, according to the International Labor Organization, women represent only 1% to 2% of the world's 1.25 million seafarers. 94% of these women are employed on passenger vessels, and only 6% are employed on cargo vessels. This would also indicate a discrepancy in wages between male and female seafarers, since the wages on cruise ships are notoriously low. Here are some numbers on women and minorities. These figures are from Peterson's college-bound website. So you get an example of the female acceptance rate versus the male acceptance rate. Massachusetts, who was the last holdout on allowing women, actually accepts 87% of the women who apply. And I think that this slide is the most telling when you look at the minorities and the numbers versus the total student body. California Maritime's shift to the California State University system in the 1990s was a positive move. The school is becoming more mainstream and more visible. I would have expected this shift from being strictly a maritime academy to being a university to increase the numbers of women and minorities. I was surprised to see those numbers are still rather low. In the early 1980s, I recall that the percentage of women at California Maritime Academy was one of the highest in the country at around 22%. Now, as you can see, they have one of the lower percentages at only 14%. So, how to attract women and minorities? You've heard from Susan Wise about the efforts of the Port of Long Beach to educate the young women in local high schools about opportunities in port operations. This can be used as a model in other ports or even other industries to get young people involved in industries within their communities. Some of you might remember the Adopt a Ship program. It's a program jointly sponsored by MARAD and the Propeller Club of the United States. The MARAD website has a basic lesson plan outline from Betty Korber. She was an elementary school teacher from Wisconsin. Although she doesn't have a full lesson plan, you can see on that website how Ms. Korber incorporates lessons on geography, math, social studies, writing assignments, ship's nomenclature, and science. I remember as a young third mate being given the assignment by the captain or chief mate to answer the letters from our ship's adoptive class. The International Trade Academies are part of the International Trade Education Program supported by the Port of Los Angeles. Nearly 200 Banning High School students are involved in the program. In addition to regular high school classes, the students who attend courses also attend courses in logistics, global trade, and geography. Students participate in mock negotiations, team building, and witness trade in action on field trips. International Trade Education Programs, or ITEP, works to prepare economically disadvantaged high school and post-high school students for careers in international trade. So, how do we make the maritime industry attractive to young people? Well, one of the great advantages is to be able to travel the world. Also, the work time versus the vacation time can be a big incentive. Some companies are offering day-for-day vacation. Some offer 1 day for every 2 days worked. Also, as the other panelists noted, rotating officers into shoreside management positions can be helpful. If they see that there's another option for them down the road, then they're more likely to go to sea. Ship-shore communications, an important part of the merchant marine of today. We didn't have that when I was going to sea. We didn't have access to satellite communication and emails. Everything was done through telex, and you were fairly isolated. Living conditions. We need to keep the living conditions improving. Alaska Tanker Company, who spoke earlier, Anil Mather, has done a great job with having salad bars and healthy food and healthy living conditions for the crew members on those vessels. Family on board. I know in the United States it's a security and a liability issue. However, on Indian vessels or ships that had Indian officers, a lot of times the family were allowed to be on board the vessels for trips. So, positive and negative things. Changes in communication. Again, I was talking about satellites and email. It's the good and the bad. The satellite communication has brought the office kind of just short of the navigation bridge of the vessel. So the autonomy that used to be part of going to sea is really not the same. Email and satellite phone calls allow the modern seafarer to have much stronger family ties. Containerization has made the job more efficient, but again, less romantic, as the port stays went from 3 days to a week down to 24 hours or less. And the need to address piracy. Piracy is a real danger, as we know from the Captain Phillips story, but it's been going on for many years. It's now occurring not only in ports and narrow waterways, where it has for all these years, but now it's also on the open ocean. Oops. So with regard to where jobs are now, it appears that the current maritime job market is in small support craft for the offshore oil industry, tug and barge work, and the largest job market, I feel, is in offshore drilling units. With many of the foreign flag companies not willing to hire American seafarers due to the high cost of medical and retirement benefits, the offshore drilling companies recognize that the training and licensing standards in the U.S. are some of the best in the world. The U.S. is far from being the maritime superpower that President Wilson envisioned. U.S. ships are typically older than the fleets of other countries. However, for the most part, they are very well maintained. We also continue to have some of the most diligent mariners in the world. It's important to continue to support the Jones Act to ensure that we don't lose the relatively few jobs we have and to continue to keep well-trained merchant mariners running our fleet. Thank you.
We have time for some questions. Mr. Brother will man the mic. Have any questions for the panel? Oh, come on. There's one in the back.
Hi, I'm Krista Kamer, and I'm from the California State University. So it's more of a comment, too, and I know that this panel obviously focused on women. The California State University is not only one of the largest public universities in the country, but also one of the most diverse, and so I know that some of this topic, the panel focused on diversity issues, and in general, I think within the CSU, our goal is to produce a successful workforce that represents and reflects California's diversity.
Thank you. Next comment or question? Anyone else? Yes, one over there.
Good morning. Laura, perhaps, or Jane, maybe you could address this. We've heard in earlier panels about the fact that ships are getting larger. With larger ships means fewer ships. With fewer ships means more or fewer job opportunities for ships officers. Yet the academies are still training navigators and engineers. How do we deal with that as a future and perhaps look at what the academies can do to train other maritime professionals?
Laura?
Is this on or no?
Yes.
Okay, is that on? I do see that, and I see that there are a lot of officers coming out. I applaud the California Maritime Academy in their looking at other types of programs, logistics, global studies, and looking at placing the graduates in other aspects of the maritime industry and not always on the ships, because yes, Lynn, they are going away. But the other thing I would like to see is us improving what we're doing with the Jones Act and building more ships in the U.S. So that, I believe, is happening slowly as well.
Jane, did you want to respond?
Yeah. Well, at Kings Point, that which I know best, we are under a legislative mandate to produce ships officers, but I know the dilemma that you're speaking of. We are talking about brown waterways, ferry transport, and preparing for more than blue water sailing, and we are doing that successfully to some degree. But maritime is bigger than blue water sailing, and I think our academies have to come to terms with that. Again, I don't know how Kings Point will handle it given what it needs to do by virtue of statute.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, one over here.
I can probably just yell. I'm pretty snowed. Based on Laura's slide.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm
please?
sorry, Chris Phillips, Pacific Maritime Magazine. Based on one of Laura's slides, it looks like 80 to 85% more young men than young women are applying to these academies. And I appreciated all of these presentations, and I understand that there's a need to reach out to young women to teach them about the maritime industry. Is there a solution out there that we're not seeing?
Susan, would you like to take that?
Well, I meant to, if I didn't make it clear, I should make it clear. We were really pleased this year to have California Maritime Academy be part of our event, and they sent 3 cadets, I think it was 3 or 4 cadets, to our event. And it was, and what's interesting when we do the event is actually the kids identify much more with the youngest people. And, you know, the Cal State system is something that is affordable. It's within grasp of most of these kids, regardless of their background. I mean, Long Beach, as you probably know, we have a very high minority and very high poverty rate in our city. So the kids coming to this event are not necessarily people that have come from families that have the ability to put them into great colleges or universities. So, and I have to say, my sense is from the interaction that we've had with the Maritime Academy, that they are, the California Maritime Academy, that they really are reaching out, and their willingness to participate in this event, I think, is one example of that. So I have a lot of hope that, and those kids are getting slotted in things other than just being mariners. I know that Stephanie, the young woman that was on the panel, I can't remember what her field was, but it was not going to see. Okay, international business and logistics. Thank you very much. But she was not intending to go to sea. But she was really anxious to participate. And she told me which company she wanted to sit with at lunch. I mean, she was on a mission. I mean, it was a good opportunity for her as well. So I hold a lot of hope out for the Maritime Academy.
Any other comments?
I'd also like to just add that something similar to the Adopt a Ship program, where we're bringing young people in grade school, making them aware of what a ship is, what it's doing. Again, helps with those lessons in math and social studies, exposes them to other cultures. And I think that's a huge part that's been missing in the Merchant Marine for a number of years.
One more comment before we break.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if there is, what models of success for academic programs in the high schools exist that you know of that expose young students to careers in maritime? The Adopt a Ship program that I've heard you talk about, but have you been successful in incorporating academic programs in global trade and logistics or maritime studies at the high school and middle school level?
Well, I know that Susan can talk more about the Port of Long Beach, but I am aware that the ITEP program at Banning High School has sent, I believe there were a record of 7 or 8 students the last graduating class up to the Maritime Academy. So that exposure has helped, and I'll let Susan talk about the Port of Long Beach.
I was going to say, I know that we have interns come to the port to work from the high schools and from the local colleges. So that's one way that we reach out to them. And our communications department has developed curriculums for grade schools where they do math problems relating to ships and things like that. So there's been a big effort. And I just want to say one other thing is that a lot of these sessions have talked about the need for, maybe it was more yesterday, but the need for the industry to be appreciated by legislators. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're all in Sacramento for this. And I think a way that you do that subtly is by when you reach out to these kids and show the community, you educate the community. I think that in turn then creates, pressure or interest by the legislators. So I think it'll come back to us in many different, the benefits of programs like this will come back to us in many different ways.
I want to thank the panelists for an inspiring conversation. I think what we've heard this morning is a glimpse of the future, and I, for one, am looking forward to it. Thank you so much to all of you.
Let me add my thanks and also mention that one of our panel members, the moderator, actually had a birthday yesterday. So we want to wish her a very, very happy, pleasant birthday. 29th. Again. Okay, so we're going to move right along.